It is a Tuesday night. We are live. Brandon Lewis, the host of Brandon's World, back with me this week after being out of the office last week from the Younger to the Max YouTube channel. Josh Ungar, welcome back to Championship Rings.
I'm not going by Unger to the Max this week or Josh Unger. I'm going by Monsters Max. And we'll get into why later in the show. But all I can say is Game 7.
Well, we got a lot to get to tonight. As always, Championship Rings is a podcast. We're in collaboration with Voltage Live. Me and Josh go head-to-head discussing the hottest topics in sports every Tuesday night. You can catch us. We are streaming live on our YouTube channel at Championship Rings 216, as well as our Twitter account /X, which is at Rings Champion. Josh, I know we talked about this a little bit before you were out last week, but you and I have gone back and forth on it. Games 1 and 2, though, did not go down as I expected it to, admittedly, though I did pick the Boston Celtics to win this series. I thought it was going to be a little more of a challenge, and so far for the first two games, at least in my opinion, the Celtics have blown through the first two games of the TD Garden.
I would say Game 2, they had to work a little bit harder to win, but they've done this in relatively dominant fashion, and I will continue to say this. This year's run to the finals and probably a championship by the Boston Celtics is fraudulent and unimpressive. I don't care what anybody says. In 3 of their 4 series, their opponent had to go all the way to a Game 7 before facing the Celtics.
Is that their fault?
I don't care.
Is that their fault? I mean, they are proving in this series why they were the best team in the NBA all year long, are they not?
They are, but I still say fraudulent, unimpressive. Every series.
I am willing to give, if you want to say the devil their due, go ahead. But I think the Celtics have impressed me even more in this series than I thought they could. And I was with you up until this series. I said this would be their biggest test. Dallas hasn't had any injuries of note to deal with. And don't give me Lucas hurt. Lucas out there putting up 30 points a game. I don't want to hear Lucas hurt. It's not an excuse. And Boston, like I said, even Game 2, where Dallas may have given them a little bit of a fight in the first half. Second half, Boston came out. They played defense. They put their foot down. And, really outside of a mini run by Dallas late, the second half wasn't very competitive. So I got to give the Celtics some credit. They are dominating this series.
Yeah, you do have to give the Celtics some credit, but overall, I still say this run is fraudulent and unimpressive. And if Dallas is going to get back into the series, they have to win Game 3 tomorrow night in Dallas. It's just like in the Stanley Cup Final where the Florida Panthers didn't play their best game, yet they still won Game 1 against the Edmonton Oilers 3-0. And then the Panthers come out in Game 2 and play more of their style of hockey, and they win Game 2 4-1. So now Edmonton's in a very similar position to Dallas, where if the Oilers don't win Game 3 on their home ice on Thursday, they're in serious trouble.
So I had said that when you take a look at this series, I understand Luka Doncic is the best player in the series. And I understand that Kyrie Irving is probably, and you could make an argument, I guess, for Jaylen Brown, but most people would say Kyrie is probably the second best player in the series heading into these finals. That's why many people gave Dallas the advantage. But I said, if you look really hard at these playoffs, and me and you have talked about this, we talked about it at the beginning of the playoffs, and we've talked about it all the way through the playoffs, how this year's NBA playoffs was a changing of the guard, how we went from the LeBrons and the KDs and the Stephs and even the Giannis's to a certain extent to your Lucas, to your Anthony Edwards, to your Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, etc. when you look really hard at a lot of these playoff series, most of the stars and superstars have canceled each other out. And it has come down to your third best player, your fourth best player, your fifth best player, your third and fourth best starters, and your first two players off the bench to give you production. And the biggest difference in this series so far is Boston is getting constant production from Drew Holiday, from Derek White, from Kristaps Porzingis, who may or may not play tomorrow night in Dallas, and that could be a huge factor because of what he's done in the first two games of this series. And
Again, if he does not play, the Mavericks need to take advantage. But to add on to what you're saying, you know, think about it. In the first series, the Mavericks basically had to only focus on Paul George and James Harden because Kawhi Leonard was in and out of that series. Then in round two, they really only had to focus on Shea Gilgeous-Alexander because Oklahoma City doesn't really have anyone else that you would consider like a star player or at the caliber of a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. And then in the conference finals, it was basically only Anthony Edwards. Well, when you look at the Celtics, they've got Jason Tatum, they've got Jaylen Brown. And then you look at their complementary pieces, it's Drew Holiday, it's Derek White, it's Kristaps Porzingis, it's Al Horford, it's some of these other guys coming off the bench. The Celtics are not built like the Clippers, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, if you get what I'm saying.
I would say that Jason Tatum has had at best a D series, and the Celtics are up 2-0. And that is really scary for the Dallas Mavericks, who Kyrie Irving did not play well in game one, and then he came out hot in game two at 8 points in the first quarter, and then disappeared and scored 3 points in the next two quarters to give you 11 to add into the fourth quarter. That's not going to win you games if you're the Dallas Mavericks. And Luka pretty much has to pull an 07 and 2018 LeBron here, in my mind, in the next two games and go for 45, 10, and 10 and pray you get 3 or 4 threes from PJ Washington, and you get some sort of production from Gafford and Lively, and you get 25 from Kyrie Irving on top of it. Because unless the Boston Celtics just have a terrible shooting night, which they probably will be prone to do at least one game in this series, Dallas doesn't have enough scoring punch to match Boston's.
No, they really don't. And I'll give Derek Lively a little bit of a break because I know he's going through a little bit of family stuff. I think his mom just recently passed away or something.
Yeah, his mother just recently passed during, I think it was either during these playoffs or right before these playoffs. So
so
yeah,
I'll
again,
I'll give Derek Lively a little bit of a break in that regard, but like Maxi Kleba, yes, he's coming off of an injury, but he's really giving you nothing.
well,
Derek,
Boston's also gotten him in foul trouble a lot. They're attacking him as soon as he's on the floor.
yeah, but like, why isn't Tim Hardaway Jr. playing at all? Why isn't Tardy playing at all? Like, we've seen
Well,
these guys.
Hardy played some minutes. He didn't play a lot, but he got in some minutes in game two, made a couple of big buckets. Um, I just think like Dallas is. I think it's basically Luka or bust. As great as Kyrie, I think Kyrie and Luka would have to basically duplicate a LeBron Kyrie Game 5 esque 41 points apiece performance just for Dallas to have a chance. Because the way I look at it right now, the way these guys are playing, I predicted 7 games at the start of this series. I'll give Dallas one. I'm all the way down to 5 games right now. It does not look competitive. Again, can Dallas win these next 2 games and maybe get back in the series? Yes, but it's going to take a 180 from what I've seen the first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I make an official prediction on the show, but like off air, I was saying Dallas can win this series. I was actually saying Dallas in 6. Yeah, Boston's like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Well,
So
again, so I had a commenter, and I don't remember the commenter's name, but it was on my Brandon's World video where I previewed the finals. and he had said, if you take a look at the last four finals prior to this one, the Miami Denver one, the Golden State Boston one, the Milwaukee Phoenix one, and then LA and Miami. They said, while Miami and Phoenix and Boston and then Miami again, well, they might have been deeper than those teams in the championship. LeBron was the best player in that series. Giannis was the best player in the series. Steph was the best player in the series. Jokic was the best player in the series. And I get it. That's why a lot of people did pick Dallas to win this series. Because again, they thought Boston may be deeper. Luka's the best player in the series. Well,
Right.
it may not matter when the team that's deeper also pretty much is almost equaling Boston's role players are pretty much equaling the production that Luka is giving Dallas.
Yeah. And Dallas's role players are not matching Boston's role players. It's really
Not at
that
all.
simple.
Luka is pretty much playing 1-on-5 right now, and there's going to be people out there, like I alluded to earlier, that says, "Well, he's hurt. He has a knee injury. Could you imagine what he'd do without?" No, I don't buy that. I don't care. I know he was getting treatment work on him before the game. You know my rule, and this is across all sports. If you're out there playing, especially if you don't have a noticeable limp or grimacing or anything like that, it's fair game. I have to critique you like you're healthy until you legitimately tell me, hey, I cannot play. I have a legitimate injury. I can't move, etc. I'm going to grade you like you're 100% healthy. And while Luca, I would say his game one was a pretty okay game of like a B minus B game. I think he gave you about an A game in game two, and you still lost.
Yeah. So, I mean, game three is a must win for the Dallas Mavericks. It
No
really,
ever come back down for Rio. I do think this is the way, and I don't know which order it's going to go, but I think that this is the way both of these two games in Dallas will go. I think one of the games will be the Mavericks will shoot the hell out of the ball. Boston will have a bad night. Dallas will win comfortably. I think the other game will be a very close nick and tuck, back and forth type game where Boston on the defensive end will make a key stop. Either Brown or Holiday will get a steal or a block or something will happen. Boston will win one of the two games in Dallas. We will go back to the TD Garden. And at this time next week, when we are on the air on Championship Rings, we will not be discussing Game 6 of the NBA Finals because we will be congratulating the Boston Celtics on winning an NBA championship.
and breaking a tie with the LA Lakers for the most championships in NBA history. Because, sorry, Lakers, I don't count your in season tournament banner for shit.
So, with that being said, Josh, when you take a look at the first two games of this series, who would you have right now as the NBA Finals MVP?
Jalen Brown. And I would say it's kind of not close, to be honest with you. Like, I get it. Drew Holiday has made big shots. Kristaps Porzingis had a big game one. But you look at the way these two games have been played out, or have played out, I should say, and it's had both games really had Jalen Brown's fingerprints all over them. So I would say, in pretty convincing fashion, I would say Jalen Brown.
And you know how much I like Jalen Brown. Me and you have battled in the past about Jalen Brown versus Jason Tatum, who is the Boston Celtics best player. It does sound like more media members are coming over to my side, which is the fact that Jalen Brown is the better player. And by the way, Jason Kidd said it during, before game two in a press conference. I know some people think it was gamesmanship by Dallas. I don't. I think Jason Kidd actually believes it, and I think those Mavericks actually believe it. But I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on who the finals MVP is because I think it is somebody you mentioned, but I don't think it's Jalen Brown.
Wait, can I take a guess as to who you think it is?
Yes, go ahead.
Drew Holiday.
No, I think right
Porzingis?
now Kristaps Porzingis is the difference maker and the MVP in this finals. I think his production, because you guys said he didn't have a great game too, but he still gave you 18 points. His
Right.
18 and 20-point spurts in production are the difference here for Boston. It is a massive lift where he has basically been the second best player for Boston in this series. But production wise and offensively, he is going on these 5 minute little bursts where he's just putting in point after point after point, rising up over these Dallas small defenders and just putting the ball in the basket. And he's shooting the ball unconsciously. That when he's giving you that, it makes Boston more on what they look like already.
Sure. And I totally get what you're saying about Kristaps Porzingis. But if Jalen Brown was injured and not able to play, maybe the Celtics still win the first two games, but I don't think they would look like this.
I would agree to that, but here's the thing. I think you can make a case for Brown. I think you can make a case for Holiday, and I think you can make a case for Porzingis. Because I think if either one of those three miss one of those two games, especially game two, Dallas might actually win that game. I do think that what we've seen out of Boston is Porzingis is a luxury. He's not a necessity. We've seen them win playoff games and series without him, but you can just see when he comes in the game. Jalen Brown didn't have a great game one. He was great in the defensive end, but shooting wise, he was not great. He missed a lot of free throws as well. I think that Porzingis has been the catalyst to extend leads when the game has been a little rocky and teetering towards Dallas potentially making a comeback.
Sure, but you look at what Jalen Brown, you have to look at like both sides of the ball.
Well,
When,
do you? Because the MVP is more of an offensive stat. I mean,
sure,
it just
no,
is.
I I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. But by the same token, you look at what Jalen Brown is doing on the defensive end. I mean, think about who he's had to go against in these playoffs when everybody's been healthy. Donovan Mitchell, Tyrese Halliburton. Um, can't really say anybody on the Miami Heat because Jimmy Butler basically was a no-show. Um, and then in this series, I think Jalen Brown has been the primary defender on Luka, if I'm not mistaken.
They have thrown different bodies at him. I've seen Tatum on him. I've seen Holiday on him. I've seen Pritchard on him. But yes, Jalen Brown has guarded them. But I could, by the way, also say the same thing about Porzingis and just the blocks he's made on some of these transition plays and getting down the court and getting easy, fast breaks. He hasn't been no slouch on the defensive end either.
Neither you're you're certainly right about that, but I just feel like I look at Jalen Brown as a healthy Clay Thompson when before Clay's injuries. I'm not saying Jalen Brown is the caliber of shooter that Clay Thompson was before his injuries. That's not what I'm saying. I'm looking at when Clay was healthy, people were saying he was the best two-way player in the league. People were making that argument. I feel like right now you could make that same argument for Jalen Brown. Can you not?
I think he has a case, though I don't know about that because I think his offensive game sometimes is not as lethal as what it would be to be the best two-way player in basketball.
Okay, fair. Again, I'm not definitively saying he is the best two-way player, but I feel like he's given himself a strong argument to be at least in that discussion.
By the way, if you want me to be totally honest, I've alluded this to be. I don't care if they're winning the series or not. The best player on the court the whole series so far has been Luka. So to me, if they're remember that discussion when Andre Iguodala won the finals in 2015, and there was talk about LeBron could he win the finals on a losing team, which only happened like in the first year of existence. Once say Dallas gets this, let's say they come back and they even it up at two, and let's say Dallas gets this to 6 or 7 games. I think there's a world out there if Luka continues this number. I would consider making him the MVP of the series on a losing team because no one's putting up numbers even close to him.
You could definitely make an argument for that, but again, like you said, the Mavericks would have to push this to 6 or 7 games.
At least six, and if they somehow push it to seven, which in order to win the series, this is the way I look at it. This is why I thought Game Two was so critical because after Game One, I kind of thought Boston just had a crazy shooting night. Dallas was going to bounce back. Their role players were going to play better. Porzingis and Holiday and White and Pritchard weren't going to have as good of a night. And I thought Dallas could steal Game Two. Now you got to win four out of the next five with two of them potentially in the TD Garden if you even get to that point, and you have shown no signs that you can do that and completely flip this series 180 on its head.
Yeah, I mean, a series doesn't start until a team wins on the road. So,
Well, that is true, except for this series, because it feels like it started. Because it feels like Boston's thrown two Mike Tyson shots.
yeah, I would agree with that.
So let's get into some more NBA news. So this kind of, I would say, shocked the NBA world on Thursday when Woj dropped a bomb saying the Lakers were interested in the UConn back-to-back national champion Dan Hurley as their head coach. And then obviously it comes out yesterday that the Lakers pretty much lowballed Dan Hurley and he didn't decide to take the job. He's going back to UConn. What's your whole take on this mess?
It, it's really not surprising that he chose to stay at UConn. I mean, especially when you look at the contract offer. What was it? 6 years, 70 million
Yeah, I
something.
that sounds about right. Yep.
I'm like, really? Like, you're. We heard reports it's gonna be some historic offer, whatever. Like, this contract, Eric Spoelstra's making more than that. Steve Kerr's making more than that. I think with Tyler's new extension with the Clippers, he's making more
By
than
the way,
that.
Monty Williams is making more than that for the worst team in the NBA in the
Yeah.
Pistons.
Um, like that's ridiculous. Like, in order to get somebody who has won back-to-back national championships to leave and go to the Lakers, LA would have had to give him an offer that would just blow him away, knock his socks off, and have him say to his wife, "We gotta go. This is an offer I can't refuse." 6 years, 70 million? Hell no! I'm staying at UConn.
So I'm gonna take this from the Dan Hurley perspective first, and then I'm gonna take it from the Lakers perspective because I think both things are true. For Dan Hurley, I do think, and I've told you this before, I think coaching college sports in particular, mainly football, basketball, I think it is harder than being a coach at the NFL or the NBA level at this point in time. And the reason why I say that is because while you do have essentially creative control of your entire roster, and you pretty much are the captain of the ship of your school, as opposed to the NFL where there's GMs and the NBAs where the superstars run an asylum, for a lack of a better term, you are recruiting 365 days a year in this sport now, and just to retain your own players because of NIL. There's a reason why the Villanova head coach left. There's a reason why Arbaugh left Michigan. There is a reason why Chip Kelly said, I would rather be an Ohio State offensive coordinator than be the head coach at UCLA. There's a reason why the Boston College coach, who I can't think of his name right now, but he's the new defensive coordinator in Green Bay with the Packers. I know most of those are football examples, but you get my point. Coaching college is just hard. It's a grind. You don't get any time off. It's constant transfer portal, and even with the one and done rule, you don't really get enough time to groom these kids because if they are good enough to go to the NBA, they're gone in 1 year, and a lot of these kids are often to go to G League, and these other places now. So,
Right.
in that same, Dan Hurley, he does have a chance to do something historic, which would be going obviously for repeat with UConn. And, they're going to be pretty good next year. They still got a lot of the same recruits. UConn's a very good school. His wife is also from that area. So that plays a factor in it. And when you take a look at it from the Lakers' perspective, when it comes to this Lakers job, I can make an argument that ever since they won that last championship with obviously Bryant, Gasol, Meta World Peace, when they went back to back, won that game 7 against the Boston Celtics in 2010, outside of the bubble year, which again, you could say the championship was fraudulent, and I can hear all that, even though they were at the time of the coronavirus shutdown the best team in the NBA, and we don't know what would happen in those playoffs. But outside of that one year, the Lakers organization has been a complete disaster. They've had Mike Brown as a head coach. They've had Luke Walton. They've had Byron Scott. They've had Frank Vogel. And they've just had Darvin Ham, and they just fired him, which seemed plan in place. And outside of the one year that we already talked about, the bubble year, even with LeBron and sort of the last years of Kobe Bryant's career, especially if you take a look at Kobe's last year, the Lakers were terrible. They were terrible in the years in between when they had your Lonzo Balls and your Kyle Kuzmas and your Brandon Ingrams. So this is not a very attractive job. And I would argue that 2 years ago, when LeBron and AD, when they went up against the Denver team and they got swept in the Western Conference Finals, which I guess would be this last year at this point, but we're going into 2 years in NBA terms, that was probably the Lakers' best shot at another championship. And this year, they would have got past Denver. You could have made the argument because LeBron and AD were both healthy. And
Yeah.
now I am betting that LeBron and AD are both not going to be healthy again for 76 games or how many games they each played. I am betting that the Lakers are going to do everything they can to draft Bronny because they want LeBron to stay in LA. And they don't really have a lot of flexibility. They need to get better role players or a third star, which they're not going to get Donovan Mitchell. They're not going to get Trey Young. They don't have a ton of draft picks. So unless you sat down and you told LeBron, hey, listen, you can re-sign a 2 3 year deal however long you want, but we're going to go in the direction of rebuilding. We're going to bring Dan Hurley in. We're going to give him all the money in the world. We want him to coach young kids and sort of rebuild our team. Then I think that makes sense. But if you were on the timeline of, hey, we got to win now, we got LeBron and AD, we got to take advantage of this window, Dan Early does not make sense. And I got to tell you, after initially being against it, Josh, I have warmed up to the idea, and I don't know if they move past this now or not, but I actually think the best hire for this job would have been Redick.
My guess is it's ultimately going to be JJ Redick. Um, but all of this could have been avoided if they simply hired Ty Lue instead of Darvin Ham from the
Well,
beginning.
well, no, that would have been Ty Lue over Frank Vogel. Ty Lue was available 3 years ago.
Well,
And
then
they
simple. You could have. I think they still would have won that title in 2020 with Ty Lue as their
But,
head coach.
and again, I like Vogel, and no disrespect, I'm the only person in the world that seems to like Vogel. He gets fired from all these jobs for no reason. And is there a point where the Lakers may go back to Vogel and say, "Do you want the job back?" I think that's on the table now. But I do think for this Lakers team, like, I think that they need a guy who is a younger guy that can hold LeBron responsible, which is what Tyronn Lue and pretty much only Tyronn Lue has done since LeBron's been in the league. Have a guy that's young, that can connect to the players, that understands analytics, that understands the modern NBA, and can hold superstars accountable. And I think from being with Coach K at Duke, from being a respected veteran in the league who could take threes and be a pretty good defender, I think JJ Redick, even though it'd be a rookie job in the circus of LA with LeBron, I think under that circumstances, he could actually do pretty well.
I mean, Look at what happened with Steve Kerr. He didn't have a head coaching position prior
Well,
to.
but here's the difference. Kerr and Mark Jackson as well. Mark had a little bit of coaching experience before he went to the broadcast booth, then obviously to Golden State. Kerr, a lot of people don't remember this. He was originally in broadcasting, but then he went to the Suns front office for a little bit before going back to TNT and broadcasting before the Golden State job. So he did have some experience working in the NBA front office, dealing with players, relationships on an everyday basis.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as being a head coach.
No, it's not, but it is some experience working in that regard. Reddick has no experience. And I'm just talking about the daily grind. And players will tell you this all the time, former players that have turned either assistant coaches or head coaches. The amount of work a player does compared to a coach or a general manager is bonkers. Coaches and general managers, we all tend to think, oh, there's not a lot going on. They don't have a lot to do during the off season or whatnot, etc. These guys are working 100 hours a week, 5 days a week, 20 hours a week, putting in game plans, going over rosters, going over salary cap, making deals. This thing's not a video game that, takes place in 5 minutes. When these guys have trades and they make free agency moves and conversations, these are things that are worked out over weeks and months, not days.
Right. And when some type of roster move is made, whether it's a free agency signing or a trade, especially like mid-season, the coaches have to adjust on the fly and try to integrate the new player or players, I should say.
That and the other thing that's hard about the NBA is more general managerly than head coaching. But in the NBA, you can have salary caps match, and it's not like the NFL where there's a hard cap. You can go over the cap and the luxury tax, but you have some bad contracts in the NBA, and we talked about this. Guys like Derek White and people like that are going to get paid soon from Boston. These role players are making almost as much money as the stars now.
Yeah. Um, and you have to balance that. But I mean, you look at it, think about it. Basically, I tried to like hype up a few college basketball games during the regular season prior to March Madness on the show. Um, but like other than Duke, North Carolina, and some occasional big games, the only time people really care about college basketball right now is March, when March Madness comes around.
I would argue college basketball is a 3 week sport now. And it starts not at March Madness, but it starts at your conference tournament. Because what have we seen over the last couple college basketball seasons? You win your college basketball tournament, you're in the dance, and anything can happen. We've seen teams be under 500 in the regular season and go to the Elite Eight, go to the Final Four. And that's what I think Dan Hurley and some of these college coaches are struggling with, which is how do we make college basketball feel relevant again?
Yeah, that's why I said, like, no, outside of like Duke, North Carolina, or if Kansas is playing Kentucky, or you get like a big matchup like that, for example, people don't care until March Madness conference tournament.
And again, with these one and dones now in the transfer portal, a lot of these guys at your North Carolinas, your Dukes, your UConn, your Kansas, they're one and done. They don't care about the rivalry. They're playing 1 year college basketball and they're ready to get to the NBA. They're pretty much forced to play 1 year college basketball.
Yeah, and also you look at it, now we have everything with the G League. Players can go. A lot of the league now, in terms of the draft, is coming from overseas. So it almost feels like college basketball overall doesn't matter as much. Think about it. You and I were talking about this during the national championships. The women's college basketball got higher viewership than the men's college basketball national championship.
Well, and as I try to say, I have debated, and this may sound terrible. You can judge me all you want. I literally have debated whether I will cover the NBA draft this year because I don't even think it's worth covering. They're
I don't.
They're
I don't even know most of the players who are in the draft.
This draft is supposedly the worst. There's two guys from France coming out, and then after that, it's a crapshoot. People are saying, executives in the week, and again, I think there's likely we'll probably have a star that does come out of this draft that nobody's heard of, but executives are saying this draft may not have one single nuclear star. We may get a nice role player or a decent starter, but it's not going to have an overwhelming game changing player.
Right. So, like, woohoo! The Atlanta Hawks have the number one pick. Who cares? Like,
Speaking of teams with a draft pick, we got to talk about this. So the Cleveland Cavaliers, not only do they have the number pick in the NBA draft, but we know the Donovan Mitchell watch is happening. We know that, and it was reported this week, by the way, by many media outlets that Donovan Mitchell was the one who did, lead ownership and did lead the charge to get rid of JB Bickerstaff. Now it sounds like James Borrego is on the hill to replace Bickerstaff and become the new Cavaliers head coach. And I got to be honest, Josh, when I heard this, my first reaction was, eh. It feels like to me, Borrego, I know he used to coach a bad Charlotte team and maybe he gets a second chance in Cleveland. I know he's from the Greg Popovich tree. I know he was an associate head coach this year with the Pelicans. But it just feels like to me, it's a JB Bickerstaff retread. It's a defensive guy, who's just going to manage the shift. It's not flashy. It's not fun. It's like, whatever. He's going to be the coach of the Cavs.
I mean, I've heard the Lakers are also interested in him, so I don't know if this is a shoe in for him to be the next head coach of the Cavs, but um I guess it could be an upgrade, but he, like you said, I don't really remember anything he did in Charlotte because the Hornets were just that bad. So I don't know if that's on him or I don't know if that's on the Hornets just being a bad team. So I don't I really don't know.
And this, he comes from the great Greg Popovich tree. This is my honest NBA take I'll ever have. I've never been a fan of Greg Popovich. As you know, I've never been the biggest fan of Bill Belichick either in New England. They essentially remind me of the same person. Greg Popovich is in Broccoli in San Antonio for 23 years, and outside of Victor Wembanyama bringing them relevance, they haven't been relevant in a decade. Popovich once said when Tim Duncan leaves, he's walking out the door, and he's still here 10 years later, doing the same old thing, not embracing the free, very old school, and that's what I'm concerned about with Borrego, is this is what he learned. Tough-minded, defense, don't shoot a lot of frees. And that's the same thing we have with Bickerstaff.
Yeah. So I it, this is going to be a very interesting offseason for the Cavs. Are they
Yeah,
able to
the reports came out today, by the way, for the record, according to Brian Windhorst, who's obviously very plugged into the Cavs organization, that Darius Garland is not available. And the Cavs are just going to run it back, which me and you both said was probably going to happen, and they shouldn't do it.
No, they should not. And Rich Paul was even saying, hey, if you re-sign Donovan Mitchell, I'm going to explore a trade for Darius Garland.
I
Uh,
I think the Cavs right now are just, and I've said this, and people can hate on me all you want. Clevelanders, you can shout from the rooftops, I'm a hater, but I would rather be terrible than lose in the first round every year. And I've always said that about the NBA because the worst place to be if you're in the NBA is to be a 6 seed, a 7 seed, a 5 seed every year. Look at the Sixers right now. Oh, we have some hope. We make the first or second round every year, and then we get clobbered, and it's recycle year after year after year. And for the record, the Cavs are going in the same direction.
I can I can hear you on that one. Um, I'm not sure if I fully agree with what you're saying,
I
but
I would rather
but
be
I
the Pistons right now than be the Sixers. At least the pit you can sell me on. We have some stability. We have money. We can get one more star, and we might be good in a couple of years. We can do the Orlando Magic formula. We can do the OKC formula. We can do the Houston Rockets formula, who are up and coming. What do the Cavs have? They have Donovan Mitchell. They have Garland and JA as trade pieces. But if you don't use them, you're running the same team back because you have no other trade options. Besides, maybe you upgrade Karis LeVert on the bench.
And maybe upgrade Isaac Okoro.
Maybe, but he's a restricted free agent, and who's going to want to pay a guy that can't shoot?
Exactly. So I, I have no idea what to really make of this whole thing.
And
Um,
here's the thing, and this will sort of lead into our next topic when we talk about extensions, because there's a couple football extensions that are out there. I've told you this too. Outside of baseball, extensions don't mean crap. These owners are paying so much money. What would make Mitchell say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to sign a 5 year extension. Let's say hypothetical with the Cavs,
yeah,
5 years max money, and then next year, hypothetically, let's just make this up. Cavs get
sure.
bounced in the first round in 6 or 7 games. What if you're Mitchell? Why would I need to honor that contract? Why can't I just ask for a trade? Because Anthony Davis did the same thing in New Orleans, if you recall.
Yeah,
Signed that extension. The next year, he said, "This team's terrible. I want out." And the next thing you know, he's a Laker.
right. And well, I would say the same thing about Zion, but he keeps getting injured, so never mind.
So, with that being said, we got a couple coaching extension news in the National Football League. Mike Tomlin, 3 year extension in Pittsburgh. Kevin Stefanski / general manager Andrew Berry signed their extensions in Cleveland. Josh, we got two AFC North coach extensions here.
The Mike Tomlin extension is the one I'm want to focus on more so. Um, because it feels like the Steelers are just kind of satisfied. It almost feels like when who was it? When Jason Garrett was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and and they just kept going 8-8 over and over again.
Coach clap. That's why I'm clapping.
Do you get what I'm saying with that? It feels like the Steelers are satisfied. Like, oh, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, and
Well,
we the
that's been their brand for the last 7 years. Defense first, toughness, culture. We win 9, 10 games. We're all satisfied. Then we go to the playoffs. We get blown up by Buffalo, but that's okay. And I'll the Steeler fan base is not okay with that. I have multiple Steeler friends that tell me that, not that Tomlin should get fired because they think Tomlin's a good head coach, but they think that, the brand is stale and they need to get more offensively minded, which Arthur Smith is their new OC. We'll see how that works out. But I think the Steelers have an issue, which is the same issue the Browns have. And that issue is I don't care how good your defense is. I don't care that you have decent weapons. I don't care that your quarterback could be good or pretty good. You're going up against John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens in that division. You're going up against Zach Taylor, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins for this year in the Cincinnati Bengals. Last year, Burrow got hurt. It opened the door in my mind for both these teams on the screen, Pittsburgh and Cleveland. If Burrow is healthy and, knock on wood for Baltimore, that Lamar's healthy, both of these teams are far behind, in my opinion, Cincinnati and Baltimore, because we know this is a quarterback coach driven league.
yeah, and I mean, you look at the rest of the AFC. We'll see what Jim Harbaugh does with Justin Herbert and the LA Chargers. You still have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel. We'll see what the New York Jets look like with a healthy Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, but Aaron had to miss mandatory mini camp because he had an obligation. I don't like that. I'll tell you that.
Fair enough. Um, you still have Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. You can't
Ooh,
just
no, you can't. I mean, they're going to win games. Probably not going to be as good as they were a year ago, but they're going to win games because they have Josh Allen, a quarterback. It's certainly better than what Pittsburgh has a quarterback. I'll tell you that.
right, and you still have Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars, C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans. So think about this: if you were to compare the AFC to a conference outside of the NFL, I would say it's the equivalent of the NBA's Western
And
Conference.
I would totally agree with that. In Pittsburgh, I don't know what team you would compare them to. Maybe the Lakers, big brand, mediocre, win just enough to get to the playoffs and get bounced in the first round. I mean, that's what it sort of feels like. You
Yeah.
know, it,
I
it
don't know which team I would compare the Browns to at the moment. Actually, no, I do know. The LA Clippers.
well, I think the Clippers are more talented than the Browns. So I
Yes,
think
but like think about this. Kawhi Leonard is their main guy, right? And he's constantly getting injured. Deshaun Watson, he was the big fish that the Browns traded for. Suspension in his first season in Cleveland. Next season, injured. Hasn't been able to stay on the field. So, in that regard, I think the
no,
comparison.
that's a good point. And here's the thing. I think that, and we'll get to Stefanski in a minute. For Pittsburgh's case, I would not be surprised, even though Mike Tomlin signed this extension. We talked about it that when you take away the back half of the Steelers' schedule, unless they pull off a miracle, I think this is the year where they don't finish above 500. So if you're going to go off that, I know for a fact because I listen to a lot of reporters. I hear some inside stuff. I know from what I listen to on a daily basis that Fox Sports had an offer for Mike Tomlin on the table to come to Fox this year and be on their pregame show the way Sean Payton was when he took his gap year if Tomlin was going to leave Pittsburgh. I don't think it's out of the question that even though he signed this contract extension, if things go very south for the Steelers next year, this could be Mike Tomlin's last year in Pittsburgh. There's nothing in that contract extension that makes me think otherwise.
Yeah. Before we get to Kevin Stefanski, let me just say this. I do think it's interesting how it seems like Fox is kind of taking over as like the main broadcast for the NFL. Like Tom Brady, when once he retired and decided to go to the broadcast booth, did he go to CBS? No. Did he go to NBC? No. Obviously, he wouldn't go to Thursday Night Football because Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime is total bullshit. And did he go to ESPN? No. He went to Fox. So it's just interesting to me that like Fox seems to have become the like sexy place to go, if you will.
Big brand, studio shows every day. They don't have the NBA. They're not paying a lot for baseball. So in that regard, that's why Fox may have a little more money. CBS pays for March Madness. Obviously, we know what NBC does. With the NFL, and they're getting back into the NBA, right? So that may have something to do with it.
Yes, but still, and also let me just say this: even though I'm a Browns fan, I don't hate the Pittsburgh Steelers at all. I I've had a lot of great conversations with Steelers fans. I've been to the city of Pittsburgh. It's a great city. I've been to a Steelers game. I loved it. So I don't feel like Browns Steelers is a rivalry right now. I have nothing but respect for the Steelers. Um, in my opinion, they are the only team that legitimately has 6 Super Bowls. Sorry, New England. You will never fully get credit for your Super Bowls from me. I don't care. So yeah.
So, in terms of Cleveland, there's all this sentiment among Browns fans. We have our guy. We finally have stability. I think he's the first coaching extension that this organization has had since Bill Belichick. But I'm here to say, and this is where Josh is a Browns fan, I'm going to disappoint you. I know. And I am viewed as a Browns hater. In my opinion, there is no way the Browns win the AFC North this year. I think the only way it happens is if Burrow and Lamar both get season ending knee injuries. I think it's more likely the Browns finish 7-10 or below than it is they win the division. I think that schedule is brutal. I think Stefanski was a little bit overrated because of the way that they worked the Flacco injury. I think the Browns need to make some major roster moves, which includes if Deshaun Watson gets another injury, you got to go get another quarterback, and we're not even sure about the Stefanski-Watson relationship. And also, I know all you Browns fans are so excited about Nick Chubb coming back. Your running game, as I've told you multiple times, was fine last year with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt and the other backs you have. I would have moved off Chubb 2 years ago. I think it is a culture embracement, and I think the Browns are doing this just for continuality's sake. And I think there's a real chance this season goes sideways. And I'm sorry to say that because I know who I'm talking to.
I mean, I would. I'll tell you this. I wasn't gonna pick the Browns to win the division anyway. I'm not one of these crazy Browns fans that thinks, "Oh, we're gonna win every game and we're gonna win the division." No, I try to keep things realistic and in perspective. That's where you and I are kind of similar. In terms of the division, I think I would give the slight edge to the Baltimore Ravens right now. Being that Joe Burrow is coming off of an injury, and we don't know how he's going to be coming into this season as such. Um, but yeah, I'm like, am I excited that Kevin Stefanski got an extension? Yeah, but like, again, Deshaun Watson has not been able to stay on the field for a number of reasons. Again, suspensions, injuries, whatever. I'm not going to get into all that. So, and was it impressive that we still got into the playoffs with Joe Flacco as our quarterback? Yes, it was, but I mean, you saw what happened in that wild card game against Houston. CJ Stroud did whatever he wanted. The Browns defense, I think their PlayStation controller got unplugged or something, or they just forgot to turn on the machine. It was something like that. Um, so, and you look at the Browns schedule, I mean, you got Dallas and Jacksonville to start, then you have the Giants, then you have a 3-game road trip, Raiders, Commanders, Eagles, come home for a 3-game homestand, Bengals, Ravens, Chargers, bye week. Yes, I have the whole schedule memorized. And then you have Saints, Steelers, Broncos, Steelers again, Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens. That's a brutal way to end the season.
It's a hard ass. You better get off to a good start.
Yeah.
Well,
Um.
go ahead, and then we got to move on.
Yeah. So, I, if I had to give a record prediction for the Browns right now, I would say 9-8. I think they could.
And I think that's being generous. I think that's giving them some home games that are tough games.
I think they can beat the Chargers at home. Given that the Dolphins game is late in the season,
That's an automatic dub. I will give you that one because it's late in the year.
yeah. Dallas usually gets off to a bit of a slow start, so I think.
And I'm giving you that one week 1.
But do I think we can beat Kansas City week 15? No. I think we'll split with Pittsburgh. We usually play pretty well against Cincinnati, so I think we get that one. Baltimore's the tough one.
And I agree with all of that. Well, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the person that we've talked about a lot in this show. Feels like constantly we always have a topic about her. One, Caitlin Clark. The question on the screen, there's been a lot of debate about this because she is not going to be on the women's Olympic team. Mr. Ungar, I know you have thoughts on this.
Yes. I did. It's unfortunate that I missed the Caitlin Clark Angel Reese stuff last week on the show. But it sounds like you and Jalen did a good job talking about that. But I have mixed feelings about this because the U.S. women's Olympic team has been dominant. I think they've won like 7 straight or something. So I think we'll be fine. But if you're trying to grow the game, Caitlin Clark is your biggest star. So why would you not want her on the team and have her on that international stage where the world can see her? You know, like the WNBA, I get it. They've grown in popularity. They're adding 2 more teams in Golden State and Toronto, which is fantastic. But still, if you want to continue to grow the game, you need to put Caitlin Clark on the international stage. And I'm sure, like, she's going to get on the Olympic team in the future. So that's why I'm not overly, like, upset about it. But it does feel like a missed opportunity at the same time.
No, I completely agree with all of that. I think it's a missed opportunity. I think Caitlin Clark will obviously, as long as she stays healthy, will be on the team in 2028 when it's on U.S. soil in Los Angeles. I will say that I'm not the biggest Olympic guy, no matter the sport. I'm not really a big USA rah rah. We have to win the Olympics type of guy. It really has never interested me that much. I watch the basketball here and there when it's not on at 5 o'clock in the morning. But even that, even the biggest stars don't participate in that anymore either. So it does feel like, in a way, the Olympics have sort of been watered down from what it was in the past. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think the WNBA did miss an opportunity. I think Clark is obviously deserving of it. But also, and I don't really know the answer to this question, has there been a scenario where essentially a rookie like Clark has come straight out of college and been on an Olympic team?
That I don't know. Um, so I don't have an
Because
answer.
I have not heard that perspective. I have not heard anybody do it. So that could be a factor as well. A sense of you have to sort of earn your stripes because while we all think Clark is talented and she's the biggest draw in the WNBA, I don't think you could sit here right now and definitively say she's the best player in the WNBA. Um,
I wouldn't even say right now she's the best rookie in the WNBA.
Exactly. And so that's why I think numbers wise, you can justify her not being on the team. But I will tell you what, there will be people that would not watch the Olympics at all, like myself, that would watch because of Clark.
And that's also valid. I feel like it's the same way in the WNBA where if Caitlin Clark was not in the league, we would not be getting two more teams in Golden State and Toronto. We would not have charter flights and all this. Caitlin Clark, if you think about it, she's essentially like what LeBron was as a rookie for the NBA. I feel like when LeBron came,
Even further, I think her, and I give Angel Reese a little bit of credit, and I said this last week because I think Angel has been somewhat of a villain to Caitlin. I think them two combined, and more Clark than Reese, obviously, because of the star power and popularity. But I think this is the WNBA's Larry Bird, Magic Johnson.
sure, um, we will have to see them meet in the playoffs a couple times at least for it to reach that level. But I can understand what you're saying with that. But again, like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, they were battling each other constantly in the NBA Finals with the
They
likes.
were, but they got the NBA on television when it was on tape delay. Kaylin Clark is getting the WNBA all of these things. And let's face it, even though LeBron has been great, ever since Michael Jordan left in 98, some NBA fans have never returned.
Oh, I I don't disagree with anything you just said. Um, so yeah, like Caitlin Clark has obviously been the golden egg or whatever phrase you want to use there, the golden girl. That's a better phrase. For the WNBA. But if you want to say Bird and Magic for the likes of Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, I think they need to meet in the playoffs at least a few times, not just a national championship.
I think when we all took a step back, because when I think we all heard it, we all went, "What? What do you mean she's not on the Olympic team?" But I think when we all take a step back and we realize, like, it's gonna be okay. It's not the end of the world. Yes, you missed an opportunity, but you know what will help Clark in the long run is when her team gets better, when she gets better and she starts winning games. That
Yes,
will make the 2028 Olympics, which will be on U.S. soil again in Los Angeles, that will be the most watched Olympics in U.S. history easily.
yes. And before we move on, um, we talked about this during NBA All Star Weekend. I loved the whole Steph Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu stuff. Now that Caitlin Clark is in the league for the WNBA, I want them to do it again. Have Steph and Clay Thompson, probably. That would be the most logical way to go. Go against Sabrina Ionescu and Caitlin Clark. But I would do not just one round, I would make it like 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah, I don't see a way the NBA doesn't have Caitlin Clark involved in All Star festivities if they're going to include the WNBA.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I know you've been waiting 1 hour specifically for this. So I am going to give the resident hockey fan on our show, the Cleveland Monsters fan, maybe the most diehard Monsters fan I know, Josh Ungar, the floor here to discuss the Cleveland Monsters coming back down for Rio to force a game 7 against the Hershey Bears in the AHL Eastern Conference Finals.
First of all, 8 years ago today, in 2016, Oliver Bjorkstrand put the puck in the back of the net to beat the Hershey Bears in overtime of Game 4 to win the Calder Cup for the Monsters, their first in franchise history, Cleveland's 10th overall Calder Cup in the city's sports history. And now, tomorrow night, from the Giant Center in Hershey, Pennsylvania, the Cleveland Monsters have a chance to go to the Calder Cup Finals for the second time in franchise history. They started this series down 3-0 after losing back-to-back overtime games in Hershey and then losing Game 3 in heartbreak fashion 6-2. And did the Monsters just pack up their bags and say, okay, Hershey, here's your free ticket to the Calder Cup Finals and a rematch with the Coachella Valley Firebirds? No, they did not. They won Game 4 3-2. They won Game 5 5-1. Then they went into Chocolate Town last night and pulled off a miracle 3-2 overtime win, setting up Game 7 tomorrow night against the Hershey Bears. This game is going to be on TV to watch. So all of you in Northeast Ohio, tune in. This is a huge game. You want the championship to come through Cleveland? We got to win tomorrow night. Game 7. I forbid you from having any type of Hershey products. That means no Hershey chocolate bars, no Reese's Cups, no nothing until we win this series. And then you can have a Hershey chocolate bar because then you will have eaten Hershey's chances of winning a second straight Calder Cup. But until this series ends tomorrow night, no Hershey products. I forbid it. So, Game 7, tomorrow night, Monsters, Bears, Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7, winner faces the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Let's get this done for Northeast Ohio.
So I have been consistent in this. I stay out of it because I'm not a hockey fan. I'm not an NHL fan. I'm not a Monsters fan. I have no emotional attachment to this. I hope they win for you. I understand there's some people in Northeast Ohio that love the Monsters and care because they like hockey, but I will be more focused on Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Sorry to burst your bubble.
Yes, as much as I care about Game 3, I ain't watching it not when Game 7 is on. No thanks. I'm watching Game 7.
Could you imagine the words? I never.
You there, Brandon? Your screen seems to have froze. I can't hear you at all. So, anyway, so yeah, Game 7 tomorrow night, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Monsters, Bears, winner goes to the Calder Cup Finals. Let's see if we got him back. Doesn't look like it. So I'm going to take over and just end the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching Championship Rings. Thanks to Jalen, who filled in for me last week while I was extremely busy all week, basically. And We will see you next week. We'll probably be talking about the Boston Celtics being crowned as your 2024 NBA champions. Also, we'll see what happens with the Stanley Cup final. Florida Panthers are up 2-0. And we will see you next time. Go watch Game 7 tomorrow night. The Monsters need you.